for work, but also for Spiritist purposes. When we brought Divaldo Franco for the first time to Chicago in 2006 for a special meeting with an American group led by a friend. And from that meeting, in which Divaldo Franco and also Uncle Nilsson were there in 2006, we put together the book, The New Generation. So Chicago is very special, for sure. It's a place where many of us have the same interest, which is to study ourselves as immortal spirits. As I begin, I wanna share with you some resources first, because when we enter the topic, we'll go to another direction. But check our apps, the Spiritist Magazine app. There are more than 65 issues there, and the Spiritist Magazine comes as an opportunity for us to read about Spiritism, original articles from people from around the world. We also have articles that are published from books that are not yet in English, but are essential for our works in Spiritism and for the studies of Spiritism. So if you go to your app store, you are going to find for Androids, iPhones, the Spiritist Magazine free of charge. You can read it on your computer. If people want to buy the magazine, we have a partner. You buy it from them, they deliver to your home. And if you want the PDF, you can also have the PDF for your own leisure. And some people use it for studies in their groups as well. Another resource that I want to share, Cardiac Radio. We have a free app with 24-hour access to Cardiac Radio. And of course, there are so many platforms. And over the years, we have shifted from one platform to another. Now we're focusing mostly on YouTube because it's accessible to everyone without a particular login. And we have almost 10,000 programs there with hosts from around the world, books like the Spirits book by Kardec. And I'll tell you a quick story. The Spirits book by Kardec was recorded by two American friends, John DeRosa and Steve Shepard. When Kardec Radio only had a program a week, we've been doing this for 13 years. We started with one program a week. And then year after year, the Spirits mentors have increased it. And then they led us to other programs. So these two friends, one in Virginia and the other in Pennsylvania, they recorded the voice of Kardec, the voice of the spirits. And in 3 years, week after week, we were streaming their weekly work until they finished the whole book. So it's a beautiful work that they've done, Steve Shepard and John DeRosa. Their voices are amazing for us to listen to the book at a day when people say, I don't have time to read. Well, you can listen to the very book. For those who are studying the Heaven and Hell book, we had more than 34 people around the world, 34, no, 53 people around the world recording the cases of the Heaven and Hell book. One of them I'm going to mention to you in our study today. And you have a free app to listen to Spiritism 24/7. The other resource is the Spiritist Parenting app, another free app that we organized with correlated to a website, spiritistparenting.org, which is a resource to help parents around the world, giving them instructions and giving them one-on-one support throughout their parenting.
We just missed you a minute ago, Vanessa. you went on mute by accident, maybe. The last heard you talk about the teens. So you're on mute now, right now.
Uh,
And yeah, she's unmuting. Just remember, folks, to close mics and close your cameras if you can. We can open them up at the end for questions.
yeah. Did you hear when I said, Pablo, about the Spiritist parenting? You heard about it? Yes or no? No? Oh, you didn't? Okay, so you heard about the Spiritist magazine, the app, Cardiac Radio, right? And now the Spiritist parenting. So we in 2015 made it official, support for parents, because Chico Xavier used to say that two things we need to do to support families, to help couples who are forming a family, getting to know, he said, we need a course for them, a Spiritist course, and also one for parents. Well, nobody goes to a university to learn to be a parent or to be a family person, and that's why we're in hot waters. So we started this effort in 2015. It's almost 10 years, supporting parents one-on-one. So we created a website, spiritistparenting.org, and we created an app, Spiritist Parenting. It's also free, with resources for parents around the world who want to know what to do in certain times. And we are increasing the contents day after day. And as I said before, we don't have time to advertise all of this because the demand is much, but I'm sharing this with you. All right? So let me now begin the topic that we agreed upon today. We're going to talk about a topic that is very sensitive to us. It talks about our pockets, right? And people say, oh, don't talk about what's in the pocket, because people don't want to put their hands in the pocket and help people out. It is kind of true. And that's why when we talk about inequality of riches, it may be quite, um, uh, let's say, intriguing for some, for other people. It is quite fascinating, for others, super challenging. And as I said, we were talking about the Heaven and Hell book and the beautiful playlist that you can find in all the cases that Kardec published. You know, there are 66 cases. I don't know why 66, but not 67, 68, or 70, but there are 66 cases that Kardec selected to talk about the dialogue between him, the group, and the spirits of that were communicating at the time. He categorized in happy spirits, suffering spirits, spirits that were very hardened in the heart, suicidal spirits, criminal spirits, and the spirits that were going through atonements, or as we say technically in Spiritism, expiations. And there is the case of Count Max. And if you go there on YouTube, we have it in a video, the story of Count Max. He was called Count Max, but he was not a count. He was a homeless. But people called him Count Max. Why? Because actually in a previous life, he was a count. And he reincarnated in the very area where he had it all. But this time he didn't. And after discarnating, he tells us the story of what he lived and why he lived in that way. It's a good reminder for us because what we have today, we may not have tomorrow. And if we don't have it today, we may have it tomorrow. Not only in another life, but in this life. So there's no guarantee of being in a permanent state of wealth or a permanent state of poverty. We'll open a parenthesis saying that misery is a choice. Poverty, not so much. A choice of the spirit that doesn't want to work. Those who are poor, they may be going through a trial, but misery by itself is a byproduct of several elements, external and internal. I'm just giving this as a teaser, so if you want to ask questions and we talk about it at the very end of this conversation. So let me share a few slides to enrich our conversation, okay? Let me just make sure that I'm going to share properly. Okay. Okay, you can see the first slide, right? Thank you. So we relied upon the very passage that talk about inequality of riches in the Gospel according to Spiritism. The Gospel according to Spiritism is for us a book that is like a roadmap. It's not so much a book that we study, it's a book to follow through, because it's an opportunity for us to feel the scripture more than knowing it. Many of us know, but don't apply. Why? Because there is a difference between knowing and feeling. Who said it? Jesus. To whom? To Nicodemus. It's in the book Good News. The book Good News by the Spirit Humberto de Campos through Chico Xavier says to us in a very particular chapter that in that dialogue, immortalized dialogue between Nicodemus and Jesus, Nicodemus asks Jesus, how come? I've studied the scriptures all my life, and the scriptures promise the kingdom of God, but I haven't found it. What am I missing? And Jesus, the Master, the Messiah, comes and says, but Nicodemus, it's not enough to know it. You need to feel the scriptures. So I remember a decade and a half ago, when I was reading this passage and translating that part of the book, I was asking the experimenters, what exactly does that mean, feel the scriptures? Like rubbing the book on our hearts? What is it? Throughout the years, we've identified that there is more than just reasoning it. That's why Kardec doesn't stop at reasoning. He adds faith. It's a work of the brain and the heart. As a neuroscientist, I can almost understand it in the sense of we have a heart below the brain, but the heart depends on this brain, and there's a heart in the brain, the sense of the modulation of this heart and all the vital functions that we have. So literally, as Dr. Antonio Damasio, one of the leading authorities in neuroscience, says, it's impossible to reason without feeling. So Jesus, way before neuroscience, was telling us that we need to put feeling with reasoning. That's the only way we're going to be able to shift from knowing to doing. So in this chapter 16 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, we're going to get to know of the reasons why we may have much today, but not tomorrow, or not yesterday, or we don't have much today, but we'll have tomorrow, and the same for everybody else. Everybody's under the same rules. So there is no use in looking at the boss and saying, man, that boss has a Maserati. How come I don't? And you feel like you deserve more and he doesn't deserve what he has. That's the same feeling that people had in ancient Rome. When we read the book 2000 years ago, Emmanuel through Chico Xavier leads us into this understanding that between Publius Lentulus, the senator, and another Jewish family, Saul and his father, Andrew, we get to know that there was an ancient battle, and the slave does not accept the authority of the senator, and they are avenging, they are pushing hard. But why? Well, let me share something with you that was quite interesting. If we research today, can you see the change of slides? I'm just confirming. Yes, thank you. So if we research in the World Inequality Report of 2022, we're gonna see, in terms of the distribution of wealth on Earth, that in this graph, okay, what is the take-home message? The richest 1% of the world's population is so much wealthier than the poorest half that the top 1% column does not fit in this graph. You can see on the left, all the way on the left, this orange red line that goes all the way up and there's no end. So the inequality is immense on Earth. And if you think it got better, it just got worse. That's what they report. Over the years, it got worse. Instead of bringing more equality, there's greater inequality. The rich become richer and the poor are poorer. And they show also 10,000 other things, but I'm going to summarize here because of the time, that the 10% of the world population, and I decided to talk now about the 10% because to talk about the 1%, it's like we already know where they are. But what about 10% of the world's population? The ones that are the wealthiest, they own 76, almost 80% of the wealth. 10% of 8 billion people have almost 80% of the wealth. They represent 52% of the world income, so half of the world income is theirs. But at the same time, and this is new in this report, 48%, this 10%, creates more pollution in the world than half of the population of the world. 10% of those 8 billion create almost 50% of gas emissions of carbon dioxide in the planet. I open up parentheses here and say, are we part of this 10%? I don't know. I don't know all of you. Is it a problem to be a part of this 10%? Well, we'll see if you think it is a problem or not. But what is the take from it? How do we understand such inequality? Can the Spiritist science address it in ways that are non-dogmatic, that are of reasoned faith? So let's see. The teachings of that chapter 16 says, inequality of wealth is one of the problems that will be attempted to be resolved in vain, as long as current life is only considered. So, just like in the dialogue between Jesus and Nicodemus, that generated the understanding that without seeing life in multiple lives, many lives, we won't understand anything. To understand inequality, why am I rich today? Why am I poor today? Why is this person? I can only understand it if I see it in this new paradigm, the reincarnatory paradigm. So if somebody talks to us and says, oh, but explain to me about inequality. Without reincarnation, we can't understand it. It's good to know of it. When you go to the book, What's Spiritism, that we are studying every Thursday with several different people from around the world, you can join us. If you're willing to participate, let me know. We can also bring you live to join the conversations. We're talking currently weeks after weeks with the skeptic. And if people come to us with that perspective, Kardec leads us into how to talk to them in a very rational way, non-dogmatic, that also can be quite consoling. So, is it consoling to know that the state of our lives today depends on previous choices and tomorrow will depend on today? For some people, it can be consoling. For other people, it may be disheartening because if they have much, they don't want to think about not having anything. And that's why when spiritualism was strong in Europe, Kardec was bringing about what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote as French spiritualism in his book History of Spiritualism, Volume 2. And he says, England could not embrace, the spiritualists in England cannot embrace reincarnation because they don't want to think of themselves as reincarnating in another nation, and especially at the time in India, because India was a colony. Think about it. Very convenient. Very convenient. You disregard reincarnation because it's not favoring you. But actually, reincarnation is a divine law that favors everybody. There's no punishment. There's a choice, and the choice is ours. So, what if the distribution was equal? Why? What would happen on Earth? Is that possible? Should we strive to make equality of riches a theme? And according to the science of the spirits, we get to know that the balance would soon be undone. That's exactly the words in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Why would this balance be undone? Because of the diversity of characters and skills. Some people are hardworking, others are a little laid back. Some people working things that can make money overnight. Other things will work on things that won't make money overnight. And soon that equality is going to shift again. And that doesn't mean that those who are poor are lazy, etc. It means that for the time being, things need to be this way for learning purposes. Well, think about the diversity of characters and skills. Do you remember when you made a choice to go to college, if you did, or to choose your profession, if you did? Some people came to you and said, why are you going to do this? You're not going to make that much money doing this. That experience is a test for us because many people decided to go the other end. They said, no, I'm not going to do what I like. I'm going to do something to make money. And everybody whom I encounter in my practice who made that choice, when they enter their maturity years, they are very depressed, anxious, full of mental disorders because they made choices based on the outcome that is external but not internal. So why so few are wealthy? Well, Kardec explains this to us. If God concentrates it at certain points, it is so that it can expand in sufficient quantity according to the needs. What does that mean? 10,000 things, but one of them is the people who have much today, it's meant to be. They have a task at hand. Yes, they do. That's why we need to pray for them. Instead of envying them, being jealous, feeling spite, instead, because we are very easy, right, to love the underdog, but we have a hard time wishing well the people who are doing well. And that shows how little progress we have done. So we need to practice daily prayer for those who are in the public spotlight, who have much resources and influence because they have a task at hand that we don't. And if they are supported by prayers, they will more likely receive that support and make wiser decisions because we are in this together. Even though physically we may not know them, but we are receiving, as André Louis says in the book Mechanisms of Mediumship. In the very first chapters, he talks about we are like fish in water, and this water is God's emanations. So whatever happens in one side vibratorily affects the other one. Well, they keep explaining to us that by giving free will to humanity, God wanted people to be able, through their own experience, to distinguish good from evil, and that the practice of the former resulted from their efforts and their will. This is the summary in the Gospel according to Spiritism of the whole book, Evolution into Worlds by Kardec, which is also a study that is at Kardec Radio's playlist, chapter by chapter. 3 scientists, including myself, we led the study of the book Evolution into Worlds with slides. And there André Louis says that our evolution from the get-go depends on effort and repetition, effort and repetition, effort and repetition. The other day I was revisiting the life of Michael Phelps, the greatest athlete of all times, no matter the hardships that he went through. And in his reports, he says how much he trained to achieve that excellence. And that excellence was achieved by effort and repetition. He made a choice. And he says that's the difference between the good and the great. And Jesus, in a parallel to that, told a parable that we can see in the book Jesus in the Home, which is a wonderful book to study at home in our God at Home meetings or Gospel at Home meetings. And he talks about the very musician who years later encountered his own servant being better than him. And he says, and he asks the servant, how come you know how to play the instrument so well? And he said, I used my free time to practice it. And through that experience, says Jesus, the owner of that servant freed him up and said, go make your life. You deserve your freedom. See, using our free time to be here. We could be anywhere else, but we chose to be here. You and I are investing in our immortality because the knowledge that we are receiving from all these Spiritist books are freeing us from ancient ignorance. And I say this for the lack of knowledge and the lack of experience, opening new pathways for us for immortality, not only for this life, but for lives to come. And that's why I want to give a short pause to continue this study by showing you a video that we put together at Kardec Radio, talking about when we decide otherwise. So I'm going to reshare my screen with a short video on a message by the renowned writer Humberto de Campos. And in this message that was translated, published in the Spiritist magazine, and also in this video at Kardec Radio, we're going to get to learn specifically about the opportunity that we are having today to overcome our inner obstacles. Sorry, I just have to reopen the video right here. It's Hold on. It's only a few minutes, and I'm going to reshare the screen so you'll be able to watch it. Hold on. Here. You can see the YouTube video, right? Can you see it? The YouTube video. Thank you. I'm just confirming. Thanks.
Yes.
Kardec Radio presents Pacific Obsession, adapted from a message by Humberto de Campos through Chico Xavier from the book Letters and Chronicles, Chapter 8. When I met my friend Custodio Saquarema in the spiritual realm, we had an emotional outpouring natural of long-separated companions. The conversation gravitated toward comments on our new situation. I knew that Custodio belonged to a Spiritist family, and certainly in this condition, he would have taken as much advantage as possible from the existence of which he left. With this in mind, I ventured a question, hoping to find him in excellent standing for entering the higher spheres. Saquarema, however, smiled vaguely and reported with the sharp self-criticism that I recognized in him.
Well, my dear, you cannot evaluate what a disguised obsession is without any external signs. I came back from Earth on the mode of, you won it, but you can't keep it. I gathered much consideration and a lot of money, but I returned much poorer than when I reincarnated. You know that I was reborn in a Spiritist home. But as is the case with most reincarnated individuals, I had some partners in past addictions and irresponsibilities attached to my mental field. Since they were discarnated, they used me to feel the terrestrial sensations, as if I were a cow, to which they were being fed as a small family. Believe me, I reincarnated with an excellent program to progress toward the light. But my vampirizers were cunning and intelligent. They acted very subtly without my perception of their influence. And do you know how? By means of simple inner suggestion. As a young adult, my friendly spirit instructors encouraged me through my parents to cultivate the kingdom of the spirit, referring to study, selflessness, and inner improvement. But inside of me, the voices of my discarnate companions in addictions emerged from my mind. They gave me the false idea that I was talking to myself.
Things of the soul, Saquarema? None of that. It is time to enjoy your youth. Leave philosophy for later.
At some point I graduated. The warnings from home grew louder, calling me to duty, while my spirit companions kept mocking me.
What? Duty? This is not the right time. How can you build a career and be religious at the same time? Saquarema, come on. Look at everyone else. Don't be crazy.
I got married and, soon after, the calls to become more spiritual intensified. But my invisible explorers kept on saying,
Don't give in, Saquarema. Focus on your family responsibilities. You have to work, earn a living, get a position, and take care of your wife and children.
I got older. My parents passed away. I was a lawyer and a banker, and I still listened to the good spirits through dedicated companions who asked me to rise morally by fulfilling my commitments. But in my mind, my obsessors continued relentlessly.
Saquarema, come on. How about the social life? You are not prepared to dedicate your life to your faith.
Then, my friend, came old age and illness, these two nurses of the soul who live hand in hand on earth. I began to suffer and became disenchanted. In my aging years, there were very few spirit friends inviting me to open my heart to greater spirituality. But at this time, the screams of my vampirizers rose louder, more ironic, breathing sarcasm into me, as if I was ridiculing myself.
You, old Saquarema? What are you going to do with Spiritism?
It's too late. Profession of faith, messages from another world. What will be said of you, old man? Your best friends will think you went mad, senility. Make no mistake, your own children will ban you, thinking you are mentally ill, unfit to manage your finances. Your time has already passed.
My persecutors did not harm my body, nor did they disturb my mind. They only encouraged me to idleness, thus preventing me from renewal. I returned to the spiritual realm like an indebted and empty-handed farmer who returns from a fertile field, where he could have accumulated unimaginable treasures. I know that you still write for men and women, our brothers and sisters. Tell them about my poor experience. Talk to them about the Pacific, dangerous, masked obsession. Tell them something about the value of time, the potential greatness of any given time in the human pilgrimage.
I hugged Sakwarima, focusing on the hope of new times, promising to fulfill his request. And here I transcribe his personal teaching, which could be of use to many. Although I am certain that, if I were now reincarnated on Earth and received a similar lesson from someone, perhaps I would be very disinclined to take advantage of it.
Okay, so why did we show that at this point? Because this effort and will, if they don't come from us, will be led by other forces. There are only two currents in life, says Andrea Lewis in the book Mechanisms of Mediumship. The law of the mental field, we attract what we emanate in a timeless fashion. So either we'll connect with the currents that are constructive or destructive. There is no neutral position. And that's why the good that we need to do that is left undone, say the superior spirits to Kardec, publishing the Spirit's book. We are responsible for the results of the good that was left undone. And by saying this, we are invited in this wrap-up to discern. So why is wealth a trial then? Kardec reports in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 16, wealth is a means of test us morally, but at the same time, it is a powerful means of action for progress. God does not want it to remain unproductive for a long time, which is why God incessantly displaces wealth. So what about poverty? Poverty is for those who suffer from it, the test of patience and resignation. Wealth is for others, the test of charity and selflessness. But it's just relative, right? You may have a wonderful house and car and everything and yet feel very poor. Other people may have almost nothing and feel very wealthy. It's quite relative the way we feel. But the reality is, for those who recognize in gratitude what they have, most often they will feel themselves wealthy enough to help others incessantly, like Chico Xavier did, though he didn't have much at all. Can the rich person of today be the poor person tomorrow? Yes, Kardec reports that someone who doesn't have it today has already had it or will have it in another existence. Another who has it now may not have it tomorrow. So what is the root problem, to wrap up? And Kardec outlines this clearly in the Gospel according to Spiritism. The origin of all evil lies in selfishness and pride. Abuses of all kinds will cease when humanity is governed by the law of charity. And who is the best example? Jesus. So I like when Mentor Joseph often reminds me, he says, Vanessa, remember what Emmanuel said in the book Thought and Life. Again, this book is an amazing book. We have the whole audiobook in SoundCloud, Kardec Radio, and YouTube. Listen to the book or the study. We have a playlist of a study too of the book Thought and Life. And there's a passage in which Emmanuel explains that God is the pilot, we're the co-pilot. Every time we're going to make a decision, look at the pilot and ask, should I do it? Because the pilot is always telling us the direction. We're simply co-creators. But if we learn to co-create with our eyes on the creator, the sustainer, the sponsor of life, God, like Jesus did, almost rarely, if never, we're going to make a mistake of that nature. So the greatest quest for us to understand the inequalities of riches and how this is going to disappear from the face of the earth is to recheck our relationship with God, because selfishness and pride are the features that distance us from that relationship. The more we have our eyes on God, as Jesus did and exemplified to us, the more we're going to make wiser choices. I'm going to stop here for the remaining of the meeting. If you have questions or comments, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for the great talk. So we are going to open up to comments and questions. If it's okay with you for the next 10 to 15 minutes. And I'll just start by, again, thanking you for taking the time. I really love the presentation and the fact that you brought in some current studies and showed to us how the gospel is very current, right? With your examples. So guys, feel free to unmute and open up your cameras for your thanks or questions and or comments.
I have a question, though. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for the talk today. I was trying to tie a little bit of what you said about the differences in wealth nowadays to historically, because it's really hard to grasp how much our 1%, how much wealthier. I mean, the graph was a good representation, but I try to keep referencing it, but how was it 100, 200, 500, 1,000 plus years ago? Were those riches also as far off than the feudal society, for example? So are we actually absolutely not improving from a 100-year or 200 or 500-year perspective? And ultimately, what does that say about us, or if we are declining in that aspect as a society? Because I like to think that in general we're moving towards progress. So I wonder if this disparity is still obviously a problem, but was it maybe even worse back in the day when people were kings and had entire countries or multiple locations and regions that they owned versus, I know it's hard to grasp, but I wonder how much of that has improved versus it hasn't. I guess, were you able to see anything related to how it was 2,000 years ago, for example, in comparison today, or was your study just based on the last 100 years?
Well,
On the graph.
yeah, thank you for asking this question. You know, sincerely, a measurement depends on the instrument. So I'm not a scientist of that field. And I read this last report in 2022, but I agree with you. I don't think they were comparing to millennia because people never researched it till recently. They were comparing this greater inequality in recent years, and they say the pandemic somewhat just made it more critical. They were especially comparing to before the pandemic and after the pandemic, showing to us how the inequality increased. And we can almost understand why recently it happened, because those who had much, they were the ones who had more resources to survive. They had more resources to go after and invest on things that were needed at the time, right? So we understand. So their report is very relative to a short period of time that doesn't account for when you said like kings and queens in ancient times. Of course, if we go back just to the French Revolution, we can tell that not long ago, like a few centuries ago, the inequality was more extreme. Their report is restricting to the current times, more modern times within the last decades, and especially focusing on before the pandemic and after the pandemic. So, do we think things are getting worse? No. We know, for example, that 100 years ago, 100 years ago, by the Spanish flu, we had on Earth 1.5 billion people. In 100 years, we have more than 8 billion people on Earth. So we have more people on Earth nowadays. And the distribution of wealth is relative to that increase as well. I'm not a scientist of that field, but what is interesting about those data is to show to us the reality check nowadays. The wealth is in the hands of a few. It may not be as dramatic as it used to be like 2,000 years ago, but it still is. So it's important for us to understand where we're living in and to understand what to do with our resources, our riches, knowing that the inequality is still astounding and extreme. Does it make sense?
I appreciate that because I like to have sometimes a better context of, how long are we analyzing it for and whatnot. So that definitely helps me get into that perspective. One thing I'll add to it too, because you specifically mentioned the pandemic, want it or not, every time in society, whenever we have, I call it world shifting energies happening, this is usually associated with war, but it could be impactful natural disasters such as, gosh, we can go back as far as the dinosaurs being killed. Every time you have these impactful moments, and technically pandemic is kind of like a war in a sense, you will have a shaking of wealth and disparities. There will be a discrepancy before I feel it's somewhat readjusted too. I think that's another good thing to take into consideration, that we might be living a expected process before we're able to readjust again.
Sorry, did you ask a question the last sentence? I probably missed it. No, just made a
reference to you saying the pandemic caused this, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Ina. And then we have other folks here and online. I see Cynthia, Don. I haven't seen in a while, so thanks for tuning in. Marga, Livia, Patricia, Joanna, saying thank you so much for the amazing talk and for all the work you do to spread Spiritism. And others here, Renata, Maria. So feel free to unmute, guys, and share ideas, thoughts, and things. Glaucia.
I don't have a question about the presentation, which, by the way, was absolutely brilliant. But you mentioned, Vanessa, you kind of made an invitation if people wanted to join a study. And And I don't know if you could repeat the date and time just for me to have an idea.
It's every Thursday at 10 p.m. It's live at Cardiac Radio. There are days we have to pre-record at 5 p.m. because we have friends from other countries like England, and the time zone doesn't allow us to really do it live at 10 p.m. So if
Yeah.
people are really devoted to the study of Spiritism and want to join our conversation, they can.
Okay. And then how do we
Question?
join the conversation?
You send us an email to cardiacradio@gmail.com,
Okay.
and then we'll talk to you and make arrangements.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right?
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I might have missed it, that I was muting here. If you want to share the email or contact that they can reach out, Vanessa, on the chat, that
Yeah,
would be
sure.
great. And Edna was also asking, is it 10 Eastern time? What time zone?
Oh, yeah, it's Eastern time. You're right, because you guys are 1 hour before, so it would be 9 p.m. for you.
And Patricia is actually tuning in. She joins in from England. So
Ah, okay,
uh,
so you know. So I'm sorry, Patricia, can I ask her a question?
looking
Patricia, are you in London?
I am like 29 miles from London, so not far.
Okay, because they have the Spiritist side of London, and they have
Yeah.
a wonderful group there. You've been there?
Which one do you mean?
The
With
Spiritist Society of London,
the Spirit Society of London?
SSL, yeah.
Yeah, is it the Fabricius one? No, that's Bournemouth.
It's Raphael and Faye Waddington.
I haven't been to that one. I have been to others. And
Oh,
yesterday, Friday, I went to Bezerra de Menezes in Bethnal
oh,
Green.
mm,
But yeah, I have contact with the cardiac group from Maidenhead
okay.
and Sheffield as well, Spiritist group.
Great.
But yeah, I think there's another one, but I don't remember. But yeah,
Okay, yeah, I know there are many groups there, but that's good to know. You have my contact there, and
okay, in
feel
the
free
chat.
to write, okay? It'd be great to receive a communication, then we can go from
Okay.
there.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, and I had mentioned in the beginning, cardiac radio. Apparently, the advent of it was in 2011, right? So it'd be 13 years coming up, right, Vanessa?
Yeah.
Anyone else, guys?
There's somebody in the chat, Marga. She asked a question. Can I answer to this question? She's asking if it's more challenging for us to be rich or poor.
Absolutely, I didn't see that.
You know, they say it's more tricky to be rich. If you go to the Spirit's book, in the study of the laws, the divine laws, it's absolutely more difficult to be rich. Why? The Spirits explain to Kardec. Because of the temptations, right? The temptation. I'll give an example. No names. I've got to know of a story, recent story. Everybody knows the flooding that happened in the south of Brazil. And there are people who are living there. They were not directly affected. Everybody was affected, but some were directly affected, others more indirectly, if I may say this way. So I know of a few people who decided to simply travel to another state and enjoy their time in a farm hotel while everybody is underwater. You see how tricky it is to be wealthy? The temptation of being selfish, of thinking of ourselves while others are suffering. It's much more difficult because the restrictions of poverty already contain us. And they say the test for those who are poor is to be patient, which most often we're not, to surrender to God, which most often we don't do. But worse than that is when we have freedom. So, for example, if you have one pencil, you're fine. But then if you have 10 types of pencil, it's harder even to work because you have to choose which ones you have to use. You need great wisdom not to be lost in the temptation of having much and not doing what is right. That's what the Spirit say.
Love it, love it.
Hi, Vanessa.
Cynthia,
This is
any words,
Cynthia.
friend?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say it was great. I think about a couple of years back, I adventure out to put together also a presentation on this topic, and I loved it. I loved some of the different angles you brought, and at the same time, the basic angles. So I wanted to thank you for coming to us and speaking and sharing all of that wonderful knowledge. And also, as another person put in the, I think Joanna also was thanking you for all the great work you do to spread Spiritism. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. You know, I often say, Cynthia, they were just parrots of Spiritism because we repeat what we study. Being a scientist, I know the difference between you envisioning and getting to form a theory and work on a study, and the other one is just presenting somebody else's study. So there's a big difference. So I feel that when we are presenting, it's so rich to be in this group here because the questions and the comments make us reflect deeper and deeper. And I want to emphasize that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much we know. It matters how much we're applying it and we're feeling the scripture as Jesus said to us, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right. But thanks for the words. It's encouraging. Thank you so much.
I got a questions. Usually I'm looking for info, especially in Spanish. Or do you have a website? What's the best way to get information to bring down in PDF book, especially in Spanish?
In Spanish, you know, I think in Spanish, if you go to Amazon, for example, there are many more Spiritist books in Spanish than in English. And because there is a great number of
No. And
Spanish-speaking people around the world in Spiritism. So the second largest Spiritist country in the world is Colombia. The whole Spanish-speaking movement in Spain, made by Spanish people, is also amazing. So our friends from Latin America overall who speak Spanish, they're great resources. So if you go to Amazon and there are many talks that people give, our role is to do it only in English. That's our task. Even though I speak Portuguese, I don't dedicate myself to the Portuguese speaking Spiritism because I support it in Brazil, in Portugal, but in the US, we must do it in English.
All right, guys, one final chance. We're coming up to 50 minutes. She wrapped up at 47, so I want to be respectful of Vanessa's time as well. All right, again, thank you so much, Vanessa, and the doors are open. If you want to circle back with another topic, we'll keep in touch. Thanks for sharing that Credo's information. And with that said, let me stop the recording here. And if we can ask you to close us up with the final prayer, Vanessa, please.
Of course. Let us feel then, as Jesus recommended, this togetherness, this opportunity of being with the loving Spiritists, the Spirit's mentors of the Spiritist Society of Chicago, who have prepared this nucleus of love for so many years before it was formed in the physical plane, and count on everyone to expand it for generations to come. Dear God, we want to thank you for allowing us to be co-pilots with you in our very lives. We are learning to look at you first and feel your directives so we don't get lost again. We don't crash anymore. We don't stay idle any longer. Thank you for the power of togetherness and of the Spiritist science that brings us closer together, supporting one another in our evolution. We are reverent to the spirit directors of the Spiritist movement around the world, and especially at this moment, to the spirit directors of the Spiritist Society of Chicago, that mercifully have planned this beautiful nucleus of love, giving love to each one of us. May we cherish each other's presence, supporting our mutual evolution and growing stronger towards the destiny you have assigned for us. Feeling the expansion of your love reaching all of us in a shower of your healing light. We pray for those who in our lives are in need of love and healing. With much gratitude, may we stay under your guidance, feeling your protection as you grant us the permission to close this moment, therapeutic and educational moment for all of us in two realms. And so be it.
So be it. Thank you so much again, Vanessa, for the lecture. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.